make a brief statement, and then I've asked Assistant U.S. Attorney Bill Hauser to be available to respond to specific questions. The United States Attorney's Office feels that justice was done in the courtroom today with regard to Mr. Conahan, and that this sad chapter of the history of public corruption, the chapter involving Conahan and Chiavarella, has been closed as far as the federal court system is concerned. And we are very satisfied with the sentence imposed by Senior Judge Kosick today. The healing process continues, and the process of correcting the abuses that were so painfully and obviously shown in this case will continue, hopefully, and will be eventually successful. We are pleased with the outcome of the hearing today. I have with me Mr. Hauser and Gordon Zubrod, as well as two of the key investigators in the case, the agents from the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigations Office, who together with agents from the FBI office in Scranton did such a brilliant, and persistent, and diligent job of bringing this case to a successful conclusion. Do you have any questions?
Peter, was 17 and a half years what you expected? Nobody put a time of it. What was it what you expected?
This will be the last statement I make, and then I'll turn it over to Bill. But as Bill so eloquently put it this morning, the government asked for a sentence that was serious because of the scope of the offenses and the relevant conduct, and we are satisfied with that sentence. Bill, do you want to make any comment with regard to that? Go ahead.
Judge Kosick, we feel, has imposed a very appropriate sentence. And knowing Judge Kosick, he typically will give a person credit for accepting responsibility and pleading guilty. And if you look at his history, this is a sentence that's consistent with the kinds of sentences he gives based on guilty pleas and a person coming in not causing us to go to trial. So I'd say the sentence, you never know what the judge is going to do in sentencing, but this is something that is consistent and I think very fair. And it shows that Judge Kosick is being consistent and fair, even in this case, which is one a very difficult case for him and for all of us.
Bill, what about the apology? What was your take on Mr. Conahan's apology?
Well, I'm glad at this point that he feels remorse for what he did. I think it helps all of us. It helps the community to feel better about this. It makes people think that, he recognizes the damage that he's caused. And so the apology, I think, is a good thing.
You sought a life sentence for Mark Chiavarella. You didn't seek any specific sentence for Conahan. Does that reflect any the difference in culpability that you think the two men have for this scandal?
I don't know that it would reflect a difference in culpability. These two, I think, the conduct was jointly undertaken. I think that the difference is that Mr. Conahan accepted his responsibility, was remorseful, didn't put us through a trial, didn't put the community through the continuing heartache of this for a couple of years. So I think that as prosecutors, we wanted to recognize that he was entitled to some consideration for that, although the crime was very, very serious and needed to be dealt with harshly.
And has he cooperated in any other cases, and did that play a role in the sentencing?
That's something that we will not comment upon. I think you did hear me say at the outset, however, that the government had filed no departure motions, no requests for downward variances in the sentence.
Art Donato said that Conahan was willing, ready, and able to testify against Chiavarella at Chiavarella's trial, and he said that he thinks that Conahan would have helped your case at trial. So why not call Conahan to the stand?
Those are decisions that we have to make on an ongoing basis and assess, what we think are the risks and the benefits of a person's testimony. It was our decision not to call Conahan, and we're very satisfied with that decision.
Have you met with Mike Conahan over the years? Do you believe he's a changed man?
As far as meeting with him, yes. As prosecutors, we typically do meet with people, regardless of whether they cooperate or not. I think that this kind of a situation can change a person, and I hope he is changed. He's definitely paying a very significant price for what he did in the past, and hopefully when he comes out of prison, he can start his life anew if he lives a long enough life that he gets out of this.
Bill, what
Will
can you
Mr.
tell
Powell
us
and
about
Mr.
the...
Miracle be sentenced soon? What's the
That's up to
plan?
Judge Kosick when he wants to schedule the sentencings.
What can you tell us about the security at the facility he's going to be going to?
That I wouldn't know anything about.
And he's been recommended for that facility. It doesn't necessarily mean he goes there.
That's true. I know Judge Chivarella is in a medium security facility, which is a pretty strict level of security, but I don't know what's going to happen with Mr. Conahan.
Bill, did you notice in your dealings with Mr. Conahan a transformation they spoke of where he was defiant at first after the plea agreement and then was more receptive to taking responsibility?
I would say that there was definitely a process that we all went through. I wouldn't say that for me it was any sort of a dramatic turnaround. Mr. Zubright.
What about the gray areas they mentioned? I mean, is that specific to Conahan, or is that something that you saw in a lot of these cases where people thought what they were doing wasn't morally or legally wrong?
I think that relates back to what has been discussed in these cases, this culture of corruption. I think that's maybe what the judge was referring to, and the gray area relates to the fact that this has perhaps gone on for so long that maybe it doesn't seem wrong to some people, and now it's becoming very apparent how wrong it is, and people are paying a very significant price for it.
Can I add something to that? As Bill pointed out in the courtroom this morning during the government statement, a judge, especially a president judge of a court of common pleas, and of course who is also an attorney, is someone who the public would expect to be able to overcome the influence of the culture of corruption, in fact, be a leader in the fight to overcome that corruption if necessary, educate or re-educate many of the people that he has to deal with in the course of his duties. Conahan and Chivarella miserably failed in that obligation as judges.
And I agree with that, and would just add that there are so many men and women in the courts in Pennsylvania who are people of extraordinarily high integrity, and so that gray area is not a gray area for them. And just adding to what Peter says, it's not an excuse in any way for what these guys did.
Bill, 17 and a half years compared to approximately 7 years under the original plea agreement is a pretty big difference. Why did you agree to such a light sentence initially when the judge obviously believes that a heavier sentence was in order?
There are many, many considerations we have to think about when we enter into plea agreements. Among them, what are the chances that there could be an acquittal at trial? What is the state of the law? And I think you all may know that at the time we entered into this the initial plea agreement, there was some question about whether the honest services law was going to survive scrutiny. That was something we thought about very hard. There were just so many things that went into that decision. There was also the consideration that if we entered into a plea agreement that resolved this very quickly, it would heal the hurt that this case has brought to us, and that was another consideration. We thought that if this was something that could be completed immediately, quickly, with a significant jail sentence, to them off the bench, that was another thing. So there are very many things that we had to consider. We also, those are not easy decisions for us. I hope you all understand that when we enter into a plea agreement like we did initially, that was not something we did lightly. It was, we all recognize the very terrible nature of this, but those are some of the things we thought about, and probably not all of them. This is something we thought about for a long time. All right, thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
We're going to